Carmelo Anthony entered the NBA in 2003, carrying a weight of expectation that most players could never survive. This was the same draft that brought us LeBron James, Dwayne Wade, and Chris Bosh. Yet it also delivered a score so polished, so complete, that the league didn't need to teach him a thing about getting buckets. From the moment Melo stepped onto a professional court, scoring wasn't a skill he had to learn. It was a gift he already possessed. In Denver, Carmelo Anthony became the face of a city's hope. He took a franchise that had been irrelevant for years and suddenly made it matter again. He led the Nuggets to the playoffs in every single one of his first 7 seasons, a feat no rookie in NBA history had ever accomplished before. He wasn't just scoring points. He was carrying a team, a city, on his shoulders. Night after night, opposing defenses knew exactly what was coming, and yet they were powerless to stop it. The mid-range pull-up, the masterful post footwork, the signature jab step, the sheer artistry of isolation scoring, Melo perfected every weapon in an era that still respected the craft. But even at the peak of his powers, the narrative had already started to shift. Carmelo wasn't loud and intense like Kobe. He wasn't a revolutionary playmaker like LeBron. He wasn't a flashy, high-flying guard like Wade. His greatness was quieter, more methodical, rooted in the fundamentals of the game. And in a league that was quickly falling in love with explosive highlights and cold, hard analytics, that subtle, patient dominance didn't always get the praise it deserved. When Carmelo arrived in New York, the pressure didn't just increase. It multiplied. Madison Square Garden doesn't just want excellence. It demands superstardom. And for a time, Melo delivered moments that will be etched in the Garden's history forever. He won a scoring title in 2013. He dropped a breathtaking 62-point masterpiece, a Garden record. There were countless nights where he single-handedly bent entire defenses until they finally broke. But despite his individual brilliance, the team around him never found its footing. Coaches came and went. Offensive systems were constantly changing. The front office failed to build a consistent winner. And slowly, unfairly, the blame started to drift toward the one constant. The one star who showed up every single night, Carmelo himself. As the NBA continued to evolve, the game changed faster than Melo did. The league shifted its focus toward pace, spacing, and a barrage of three-point shots. The art of isolation scoring was suddenly labeled inefficient. The mid-range dominance that was once his signature was now called outdated. And Carmelo Anthony, once celebrated as an unstoppable force, was suddenly being described as a problem that needed solving. Rather than the solution you build a team around, the criticism grew louder and more persistent. He doesn't pass enough. He doesn't defend enough. He doesn't fit the modern NBA. What this criticism always ignored was the context. Carmelo had spent his entire career being asked to carry offenses that had no other reliable option. He was built to be the finisher, the guy you give the ball to when the play breaks down. When teams needed someone to take the hardest, most contested shots with the clock winding down, they called his number without hesitation. Then they criticized him for answering the call. The fall from grace came swiftly and brutally. One moment, Melo was an Olympic hero, celebrated as one of the greatest international scorers the game had ever seen. The next, he was out of the league entirely. There was no farewell tour, no tribute nights, no victory lap. For a player destined for the Hall of Fame, the end came with a deafening silence. It felt cruel, unjust. For nearly a year, Carmelo Anthony waited by the phone. And the league hesitated. Not because he couldn't play anymore, but because the NBA had already made up its mind about what kind of player he was. He was a scorer who didn't fit neatly into a spreadsheet. A star whose confidence, the very thing that made him great, was now seen as a liability. Then, when an opportunity finally arose, Carmelo changed. Not his skill, but his role. In Portland, and later in Los Angeles, he accepted fewer shots, a smaller spotlight, and a new sense of humility. He transformed into a role player without ever losing the essence of who he was. And in doing so, he quietly reminded the league of something it had conveniently forgotten. That greatness doesn't just disappear because the style of the game moves on. Yet by the time the respect he deserved finally returned, time had already won the final battle. There would be no championship parade, no storybook ending to his career. There was only the recognition that arrived years too late. Carmelo Anthony's career forces the NBA to confront an uncomfortable truth. Not every legend is born into the perfect era for their talents. Some players define the game, while others are defined by it. Melo was a master of a dying art, and when the league turned the page, It didn't bother to look back long enough to say thank you. His legacy won't be measured in championship rings. It will be measured in resilience. It's about carrying franchises on his back. It's about scoring the basketball in ways very few have ever been able to. And it's about standing firm in who you are, even when the entire world is telling you to change. Carmelo Anthony didn't get the ending he deserved. But history will remember the scorer who never cheated the game, even when the game itself changed on him. Thank you for watching.